pandemic got us into a reflective space and made us look inward to see what we can do for the world at large. As a self expression coach, I became a catalyst for women and started Vani, a one on one coaching program for women on finding their voice, to speak up, to be visible. As a storyteller, I spotted there were many ordinary people amongst us leading extraordinary lives, making a difference to the world, and they needed to be heard. Thus was born You and I with Rashmi Shetty, where amazing personal journeys with their uniqueness and individuality are showcased. A reaffirmation of the fact: open your eyes wider. The world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. Our guest today is Jithin C Nedumala, co-founder of Make a Difference, popularly called MAD, at the age of 19, with a vision to enable the most vulnerable children to break out of the vicious cycle of poverty. He was awarded the Ashoka Fellowship for developing the self-organizing community model that provides a lifelong support system for children in need of care and protection and enable them to achieve equitable outcomes. Make a Difference mobilizes young leaders to ensure equitable outcomes for children living in shelter homes. As of today, Make a Difference works with 5,000 children living in 83 shelter homes in 23 cities across India. MAD's highly efficient delivery model annually mobilizes 400 fellows and 3,500 volunteers to deliver a range of interventions aimed at helping children overcome their challenges despite the circumstances they face. As the CEO of Make a Difference, Jithin's mission is to solve the problem on its full scale by 2030. Listen in as Jithin shares the inspiring journey, the challenges, the highs, the lows, and his life lessons. Hi, Jithin. Always a pleasure when it is connecting with you because I've admired the way you've handled yourself, your life, your dreams, and how you make a difference and make it seem so simple and possible. Welcome to You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Again on the journey of what makes Jithin Nedumala the man he is. How did he start the journey from the little Jithin to the Jithin that the world knows today? You lead, we come along.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. It's really I feel very nostalgic about this meeting already. But nothing, in some way, I also feel like nothing has changed. The energy and enthusiasm which like the conversations flow is just beautiful. So really happy to be here, and I hope I'll be able to do this every 10 years for a while now. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm when you ask me these questions, I wonder, like, who would want to listen? But so genuinely grateful for giving me the space, and looking forward to this conversation more from even for me to kind of, even I have not really asked myself the question, what has made me who I am? So probably at the end of this conversation, we'll figure it out.
But the very purpose why you and I was born is everyone's leading their life their way. But then there are some people who have gone beyond themselves to make a difference. And that MAD Make a Difference that you stand for definitely and distinctly stood out for me. So, what are your childhood influences that made you move in that direction? Is one of the ways you can maybe tell us your story and see where you can drop an epiphany for someone listening to this, for them to make their difference in the world.
Amazing. Sure. I genuinely don't know what exactly led to who I am today. I think it's like so many small experiences throughout. But the more I'm kind of learning, even the work that I'm doing, I'm assuming parents have a huge role to play in who you are, and that experiences that you had as a child is definitely something that shapes you. So I grew up in a family of like overachievers, is what I would say. Both my mom and dad both used to play for the country. They were both volleyball players. They have played the Asia together, 1982 Asia together. So and they both came from really humble backgrounds. Uh, in some ways, like humble is also a spectrum. But they came from the villages. They worked really hard, and from a very young age, it was very clear in my family that you need to work hard to be anything. So hard work was like a very strong component that was there, which is obviously cliched, but somewhere I, even today, I working hard is not something that I frown upon, to the point where I feel it's also almost, I'm now starting to experience the shadow of it, which is that I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job if I'm not working hard enough. And now that I've gotten married and I'm going to start a family life, I kind of starting to feel that probably I should, not be working as hard as probably my dad was, and I need to have more of a balance in my life. Um, but and dad definitely is a huge influence in my life. From He was a communist from a young age. His father was a Marxist, so there is that component that is there in the family, and the whole equality, like the conversations that I've had with him, and have all definitely left some kind of a connection of equality, and in my life for sure. While my mom was religious, she was a religious Christian, and I had to go to church most of my young life. And even though I never appreciated that at all when I was younger, now as I'm getting older and older, I'm kind of rediscovering my own spirituality, I am able to kind of like connect with all of those a lot more. So not that I'm a practicing Christian in any way, but I kind of now started understanding what spirituality is, or like what any of these religions are about. And it makes a lot of sense to me, and I sometimes feel sad that more people are not actually, like don't, like more people of my generation, like I remember, I remember when I was like probably uh, the 18 to 19 years old, that who would believe in God in my generation. Like I would, like, nobody in my generation will really believe in God, right? But now I've kind of come up 180 where I'm like, it is so sad if somebody does not understand religion and is not able to use it as a way to navigate life. So that's been quite an interesting journey for me. So yeah, so I think life is kind of like a lot of my younger experiences have kind of coming back home to roost in some way as I'm starting my own family life. But yeah, those were those experiences definitely were there. But I would say that the most like there were some other experiences. Those are definitely the positive influences, but I also had quite a lot of negative influences, which I am still trying to kind of like work through. Which is that I was a very restless kid for most of my childhood, which basically meant that I kind of got into trouble quite often. And even though at that, there was a time in my life where I kind of looked at it as a badge of honor that I've got into trouble, but like it doesn't matter. I've kind of gone through it. Nowadays, I'm starting to realize that like all of that has had some kind of an emotional impact on me, in a way that I am actually still very I can get triggered when somebody gets angry at me. Like even though most of the time I'm in a very calm and peaceful environment where everybody is nice to each other, when somebody shouts at me, I kind of become somebody else. I become that young child, and I'm surprised that that person came out. Kind of realizing that I need to kind of heal from some of the childhood experiences that I've kind of had, even though I never thought that they had a huge influence on me. And none of them are really that drastic. It's just getting caught for doing something stupid, and being humiliated in front of the whole class, things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I still feel like that at times, and it has had its own negative experiences. That's probably had an impact on me. And um, and and I think, last but not the least, I think probably the pivotal moment in my life was really when on a day before my birthday, my 19th birthday, me and my group of my friends went for a trip, and one of them died in the trip. That was a like, and I definitely blame myself for it, and it was quite a traumatic experience. And it really kind of threw me off from my balance of my life. Till then I was still I will go, I'll do my CAT, do my MBA, make some money, make my parents proud. Was what the journey was, but it really made me relook at what are my life's priorities in some way. And I think not in a very healthy way, to be honest. It kind of felt, I think for the first time I felt like I made a mistake that I cannot undo, and I was in some way processing it as I probably don't have the right to live unless I am doing something good. And that's how I entered a shelter home for the first time in my life. And it was definitely a transformational experience for me, probably because it was just a month into it and I was still in it. But I think what really happened is that I was able to connect with the children that I met with at a very deep level. It's almost like I needed so much and they were ready to give. So it really became a two-way process of healing in that time period. And in some way it can kind of give me a sense of purpose. It like somebody who kind of felt that what next was really like I was not even sure whether there was a next after what I just experienced, but then it gave me some sense of purpose to, okay, I can do something with my life. Yeah, and then it kind of grew organically from there. So if you really ask me whether I would have still done all of what I'm doing now if that had not happened, probably not. I don't know. Once I had started, it kind of helped me, gave me an opportunity to restart my life the way I wanted. And I feel like that was quite a big gift that I received in life that any 18, 19-year-old young person would receive, where, they can look at their life experience so far and decide who they want to be or who they should be, right? And live a lot more intentionally going forward from there. And I think because of the self-hatred I was having, plus probably the work that I was doing, I was really be able to be in service of something larger than myself. And that process of just being in service, like every day waking up and going to a shelter home, spending time with children, and then Matt started, and it was just took over my life. And just like not worrying about yourself and just being in service definitely was a spiritual experience. It just cleared a lot for me. It's been a great journey in Mad. There were definitely ups and downs, but I think post all of this, where I am is, I think she was a Aboriginal woman who said that, and when the missionaries came to kind of help them, she said, if you have come here to save us, you're wasting your time. If you're here because your liberation is intertwined with ours, let's work together. And that's really what I feel the journey of MAD has been for me and thousands of volunteers that's been. And yeah, I'm hoping that now we are in the space where we feel ready to finally scale. Hopefully we can reach out to more people.
Okay, there is so much you have said, Jithin, in this small little introduction to your journey itself, from the 19-year-old to the Jithin that you are today, and MAD. So when you went into the shelter home, you said everything shifted for you. Both were getting healed in the process. But what did you think you will do at that point when you entered the shelter home and felt good about it, that you're going to take this forward, join the shelter home as one of the people taking care? What struck you that you decided to take that step forward, and how were your initial journey steps? Because it's all about the initial steps. Once it's kind of set, it's easy to build on it. So the foundational stones and values and principles on which you build an institution or any thought process, what were those important milestones?
The first time I entered a shelter home was because my friend, he got into a really good college in law college in Pune. So the day before he was going, he's like, I don't want to party or anything. Like, can we do something more meaningful? And we got a box of laddus and we went to this. His father knew this childcare institution, YMCA, and went there. And the idea was more from the idea of, like spend a couple of hours with the children. That's it. And, spend some time with them and leave. And but I was kind of doing a little bit of MC work and all that stuff back then to kind of, make money. But so I kind of like did a little bit of like, and, basically played some games, theater activities with children.
Okay.
And he was also there. And what really struck me was, one was that, like, children were so happy to see us, and they really enjoyed our presence. We did not imagine that, number one. But more importantly, when we were about to leave, we said, okay, fine. It was more like a formality. We said, okay, we'll come again. What do you want next time we come? And we expected like jalebis or something else. And they said, can we have books? Right? And that was definitely something, we did not expect it. And we were kind of almost like, wow, like we should get books, like it doesn't make sense, like hear something like that and not do it. So fine, like, so he, next day morning, before leaving to Pune, he dumped a lot of books in my house. I took a lot of my old books, and we just went there and kind of set up the library there. Probably one of the first instincts that I had at that point of time itself was that this should be owned by the children. So we called it the Royal Library, and children were made the warden, even though there was a warden and things like that, like children were kind of made the people responsible for it in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of empowerment at their level itself, like, and ownership for making it what they want it to be to some extent. And I said, okay, fine, I'll come back next week. If you have, and there's a register, if you guys have read it, we'll get more books and things like that. And I go the week after, and there were some 20 book reviews on the table. And I was not expecting that at all, and it was like, I still have those book reviews. So recently I went back home and it's all kept there. And some of them are quite intense. The truth is, children in childcare institutions are going through quite a tough time. And they are kind of like, dealing with their life, and, they use literature and things like that as a way to kind of process it and make sense of it. I would say that many of them are living a hero's journey themselves. Right? Like, so I was very inspired by what they had written, and how they genuinely were interested in wanting to know more and learn more and things like that.
And how old were these children?
Predominantly between the age of 10 and 15. So it's they're not the most mature kids.
Yeah.
So that's where so then from then on it was not a conscious decision, but I ended up going there regularly, and the bond started building, like through that process, which is and it kind of got to a point where, like, it was not that I was going there for them, but more like, this is how I like to spend my free time.
Yeah.
And the only thing I want to just bring out here is that if I had not experienced that, like a trauma, probably I wouldn't be so in touch with what I need, sensitive enough to be able to connect. So many young people don't feel that connection in the first time they enter a childcare institution, and at the end of the day, in the most easiest way to communicate what is Matt trying to do, I'm hoping that every volunteer is able to experience that connection. Because I know that if that connection is established, everything that comes out of it is magical. Like, what came out of it, that connection, but Matt came out of it. But for every individual, something magical will come out of it. And how can we make that happen is really what I'm thinking about.
Okay, so here you are, but how did you find your team of volunteers, and how was it? Because literally you were making a difference mutually, the children to you and you to the children, that the name Make a Difference came about. Because MAD has so many other synonyms to it, but this is one of the most meaningful synonyms that I have ever come across. So how did that first core group of youngsters and similar minds get together to form this beautiful institution called Make a Difference, or MAD for short?
It was a very random activity by so I kind of spend the rest of my year in the childcare institution. During the summer break, the guy who went to Pune, he came back to came back to Kerala, and I was kind of telling him all these things that's going on, and like, that was one thing that was happening. On the other side, a lot of my friends came to know that I'm doing this, and to my surprise, a lot of young people actually wanted to do something like this, but never knew how to go about doing it, and there was interest from their side. And so I'm like, why don't we start an NGO along with him? And we started kind of brainstorming about it and what should we do and things like that. And I got another friend of mine who had just finished his MBA from IIM Lucknow, and he was sitting jobless. So we're like, okay, fine, let's talk to him. He might know how to set up an NGO and figure this out. So then he came on board, and one of his friend came, another one of my friend came. So it was all just like a bunch of friends who kind of used their summer holidays to plan something. And the idea was to do one presentation, one recruitment presentation, where we will just invite all of our friends and let's see if they would want to do, spend their weekends like I did in a childcare institution. That is basically the simple plan. And to our surprise, so many of our friends turned up. There were some 50, 60 people who turned up for the recruitment presentation on day one. And quite a lot of them were very interested in joining. I think the only interesting part of all of that is that the people who turned up so I was definitely slightly an outcast in the school. I was not definitely the nice, the studious kid and stuff like that. And obviously my friends were also not we were not the typical NGO people. A lot of them were the people that I used to party with, or who used to get into trouble more often than not. And it's not like I did not invite the studious kids. I did invite them too, and this is probably because I was involved in it. The studious kids did not join. And it was the rebels in some way that ended up joining the organization, and that vibe was really there. And then now when I look back at all of this, what really strike me is that a lot of the people who rebel against the system, all of this, they have had a pretty tough childhood themselves. And it's all a reaction in many ways. And now that I look back at people who stayed back, stuck with the organization, these are all people who have, and I know them now quite intimately. They all had quite a tough childhood themselves. And they were kind of inspired by the idea that, other children shouldn't have to go through this. But I want to also say that none of us made any of these correlations at that time. It was so subconscious. And that's when I really understood that recruitment in MAD, volunteering in MAD is a very subconscious process. Most people, if you ask them why did they join MAD, they will say, I had nothing else to do that weekend. That's why I just turned up. I just, nothing is like, I really wanted to make a difference and this is the opportunity I got. Nobody says anything like that. But at the end of the day, not everybody signs up and turns up for recruitment and then turns up on a week-on-week basis for a whole year at least. And the more I've kind of gotten to understand my core team, and even the team that I have now, even many of the volunteers, because we kind of do have these intimate conversations between us too, that we do kind of attract people who have had tough experiences themselves and hence understands in some way, relates in some way. Not that the magnitude is nowhere similar to what our children have really experienced, but it is in some way that empathy that also drives people to want to act.
So here you are, a bunch of youngsters starting off in Kerala, but how did the word spread and how did you go pan-India? And how did you decide what are the children's homes you're going to go into, or the freedom is completely left to the team in that particular city to decide the homes that they're going to go to? What is it that took it pan-India? How did you step out of Kerala to other parts of India?
Yeah, so I feel that we had no plans of going outside India. I don't know, we did not even have outside Kerala or anything more. The idea was that we will run MAD. I was still in college, and we had not even thought about what we do after that. But we did things really intentionally. So after and we did things really well. So for example, there was teacher training that was going on for all the volunteers. So back then Orkut was a big deal. Yeah. So all volunteers after class used to come we had created a group in Orkut where they used to update what did they teach the children on that day, what are the challenges they faced, long articles, which then the idea was that so the other volunteers who are going can then kind of support and all that stuff. Yeah. But it kind of ended up becoming like a journal online about the day-to-day experience of a MAD volunteer, and other people from across the country started reading it, and we started getting more and more likes from people who were not part of the community. We were just some 70 people in the city, and soon, I remember one of my happy memories in the early days was I used to wake up every day morning and there'll be some new email because we have, you could register to be a volunteer on the website. There'll be somebody who would have registered saying, I want to join MAD. And there is one section which says, why MAD? And people will write. And it was just so happy to just read it. It was such a positive dopamine hit every day morning when I wake up and I'm how many people have registered? And then And I remember this time when the number earlier was like 1 or 2 a day, to it kind of got to like 15, 20, 30, 50 emails a day. People who want to apply, and this is not people from Kerala anymore. It's people from across the country who were all like, basically, we got lucky with the fact that, you know, young people across the country at that time were really wanted to do something but did not know how to go about it, and could see this group of people who have done it. So the people who joined contacted me. It really, mad really started as a movement than an organization in any genuine way, because like they just said, okay, I want to do the same, could you tell me how to do it? That's all. And then, I just sat down and created something called make paint your city mad. The idea was just like, what did I do to kind of start mad? And the idea was that follow these steps. You can identify your own shelter home, you can identify your thing, and then bring enough volunteers into a room. And then if the volunteers turn up, then I will, if you get this many volunteers to turn up, I will come there and I will do the recruitment workshop, and I will train you guys to kind of run it, and then I'll come back. That's it. That's the only engagement. Then I'm available on the phone if you want any help. So, like, more and more people started doing that. Even the friend of mine went back to Pune, and he kind of set up there in Pune. Another volunteer of mine went to Hyderabad and set up in Hyderabad. So it kind of started like slowly growing that way, and they could do whatever they wanted. Like, it was not like there was any command structure. But I remember them calling me actively when there is a problem, and kind of going there to resolve. And there was a time when I used to be like on the road like 200 days in a year.
Yeah.
I'm like traveling and visiting and kind of making sense of what's happening and all the stuff. And it's when I was traveling like that is when I realized that uh, not every place was like Cochin. And each place had their own culture,
Culture. Yeah.
and not all those cultures were positive.
Yeah.
Like places where, because I did not really do any kind of check on who's starting, right? In places, and the intention, it's like I started mad with a particular intention, which was not always the case for a lot of other people who started. There are a lot of other reasons to start an NGO. It helps you with your resume, it helps you with your ego, all those kind of stuff. And then all that started playing out, and it kind of became clear to me that it is not as, not every place will just turn out to be naturally like what had happened in Cochin. It was beautiful. So what we did was in 2008 to 2009, we kind of like brought all the city leaders together, and we kind of said, how can we? And they were also very understood that they were really struggling to keep a voluntary organization running. So the decision was that we will kind of make MAD into like one organization where I was the president and everybody else was like city's thing and all that stuff. We kind of just copied the model from ISEC. So, and like, we will all share knowledge with each other. We will have regular calls, and we started using technology to kind of track volunteer attendance and things like that, to kind of ensure that, like, so for my objective was that you have, like, if you are a volunteer at MAD, you have to spend 2 hours on a weekly basis with the child. If you're not doing that, you cannot be a MAD volunteer, right? Like, so that was how do you kind of enforce it. So then what kind of value systems that do we need to have? So we started kind of having those conversations a bit more, and then out of nowhere, Michelle Obama kind of like got to know about us, and she came, and then she can, that became like a big deal from then. So then it's like we kind of exploded after that. More and more young people started. But then the second round of scaling that we did was a lot more, where we interviewed people who wanted to start. Just because they started doesn't mean they get to set the culture. There was a common MAD culture, value systems that we came out with. We had 3 values. So we basically brought in all the city leaders together, which was around 300 people in around, I think it was around 2010. And we said, what is MAD at its best? That we should never forget, no matter how big we become. And we came with these 3 value systems, which is that, cause above self, leadership through ownership, and a sense of family. And it was facilitated by a friend of mine at that time, who had run a much bigger youth movement than mine. So he knew what he was doing. And interestingly enough, even today, the 3 value system resonate with us so much. It is so central to, and I'm actually surprised, because everything else has changed. In fact, the values still remain. is quite a quite an interesting experience, if you ask me.
Yeah. So when in 2010 you all met up, it was a decade with Mad, or was it younger than a decade at that time? When did Mad actually start? The seeds?
It was 2006 is when Matt started. So it
So
was
in
only
4 years, you got the value system in place.
yes, yes.
Okay. So within those 4 years, by the time you zeroed in and narrowed in on these three value systems, you said there were also certain spaces which were negative, which you saw people coming in with different intent. Can you take a step back to see the highest high in those 4 years that you've had about spreading Mad beyond Kerala, and a space where you actually took a step back and said, should I allow Mad to go outside Kerala? Were there two such parts of the spectrum that you can revisit?
Interesting. I think the highest high would be when, like, I remember going to a home in Hyderabad and talking to the children there, and I couldn't speak their language,
Hmm.
and but they loved their mad akkas and annas, and they were just so happy, and I remember thinking that there would have no way that I would have ever been exposed to these children. Like, there's no, like, I wouldn't be humanly able to do any of these things.
Yeah.
So I remember feeling this extreme gratitude for everybody who started, and took it, took, and something like, in some way, like, because I remember hearing them keeping saying mad, mad, but the kids, because what I could understand was mad in their language. And I'm like, this little thing that we started, it's like, it's now they have owned it. It's something they own. It means so much to them. That I remember was like that made me realize that it has gone much beyond me, and that's amazing. Felt very happy about it. And like, I think one of the travels I think I had to one of the cities, I could just see the amount of infighting that was going on in the leadership team, and classes were not happening. It was like there was a leadership team, and they were having meetings every week, and the no fight, but like, classes are not happening, volunteers are not turning up to class, children's time was getting wasted. And I could see, like, Matt becoming this, like, wow, like, now, like, I hated when I was a child when my weekends were taken away, and now Matt has become this organization that, like, children have only some free time in their weekends. They're busy throughout the week for, like, because they have to do so many chores. Some free time they have to watch TV or play football. Because of me, now they are going to lose it, right? Like, I'm like, oh, it's not just possible to make an impact, you can actually make a negative impact also, and you have to take ownership of both of that. And it's then that I remember distinctly deciding that no matter who is running Mad, I will personally take responsibility of Mad's impact. And I cannot, like, if we are not creating impact, because it's also in a franchise model, you can always say that, my job is to share it, and what you do with it is completely up to you. And I was not comfortable with that idea, where I felt that, like, if Mad exists in a place in a child's life and it's not creating a positive impact, that's on me. And that actually created a big, like, now that I think about it, because we are still, from an impact point of view, a very tightly controlled organization. Like, even today, every volunteer attendance is marked. We do actively see if the children are happy with the Mat class. If they are not happy, we can take action on it immediately. So even though it's distributed across 23 cities, and it's all run by volunteers, and it's managed by volunteers, and they are also managed by volunteers, there is a very strong accountability system, and that has not gone away in Mat.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. 23 cities. And how many volunteers make up Mad on a rough count?
Now it's around 3,000 volunteers. We are going to hit 3,000. Our recruitment is going on right now. So by the end of the recruitment, we'll be around 3,000 volunteers. So in our heights, we have gotten up to 5,000 volunteers. So what happened is that in 2012, we decided not to scale. Decided to pull back, decided not to scale, because we realized that the impact that we were hoping to create, which was that, children in our objective was children who end up in shelter homes, their children should not end up in a shelter home again. Break the cycle of poverty. And we thought at that time teaching English will break that cycle of poverty. Obviously, that turned out to be wrong. By 2012, I realized, because I was working with the same children from 2006 to 2012, those children passed out of the shelter home. And I realized that their life is not fundamentally better. And I also had some other pretty drastic experiences. Like, I participated in this rescue program for rescuing children from the streets. And all of that made me realize that the impact that we're creating is nowhere enough to be worthy of taking to more places. You have to first ensure, like the way we say it is that, like, impact is not an incremental increase, it is a benchmark increase, which is that, if a child is drowning 10 feet underwater, it doesn't matter if you can reduce the drowning distance by 10% or 20% or 50%. Child will still pass away in 2 minutes.
Correct.
You have to get the child above water. And we felt that we were making some improvements, for sure. We were delivering the Cambridge English for Schools curriculum. They were writing KET, BET, and they were passing those really well. But there is just incremental increase in their life, and they were not out of water yet. And we really focused on. So then in 2012, we stopped scaling. We kind of actually shrunk as an organization, because we're like, we're going to just double down on learning what are the programs that we need to develop now to ensure that we can confidently say that children coming out to make a difference, 90% of them, will break out of the cycle of poverty for sure. And that's what. So by 2020, I felt a lot more confident, because the kids that I started working with are now 26 to 28 years old. And they are now, and we have built such strong community for them that I know for a fact that their children are fine, and they are married, they have kids, and they're doing well. So as an organization, we realized that, okay, fine, it's time now, because now we feel confident that our program works and 90% of children will achieve equitable outcomes. So now we're kind of getting ready to scale again, and the target is to kind of hit 350,000 children in the coming decade.
Okay. And so what was that shift, Jithin, when you stopped in 2012 to take a step back to see what you're doing? And I love that analogy when you said drowning. What did you do in your approach that just allowed them to come a little above water so that they could at least breathe? What did you shift? Okay, English, yes. Many people still think that if children speak English, their life's done. What did you realize? Because you were picking children from those backgrounds where everything had to be reset, and there was a lot of trauma they're coming from, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So actually, we had to do a lot. It took us 8 years to figure out. It was not one single shift that we needed to do. What we realized is that now where we are is that, number one, all our children have gone through adverse childhood experiences, multi-layered adverse childhood experiences, which means that they need a strong, stable, caring relationship in their life. They need stable adults in their lives for prolonged periods of times. So we identified this program called Developmental Relationships, which is done by Search Institute, which is like a framework on how to build transformational relationships in children. And we deliver that to our volunteers. So that is one change. So we kind of ensure that children have stable. So till then we were an education organization. From there we shifted to a caring organization. Our primary job of volunteer is to be a caregiver, to be a caring human being. Unconditional positive regard and unconditional support for the children. The children feel safe. So being able to create that safe space was one big part of it. The second big part of it was that what we realized that you can provide all the care in the world, but if nobody's paying for their college fees and not paying for them to have a place to stay and to a stipend to live, not even the most cared child will go to college. There'll be some exceptions, but majority of it, I wouldn't go to college if that happened, right? And going to college was a critical component, because if you want to get into a job that earns 20,000 rupees or more, it does cost a lot. Unless you have a college education, a higher education post 12th standard, you will not be able to hit those numbers. And what we realized that you need to get hit around 40,000 rupees by the time you're 28 to be able to really break out of the cycle and support a family.
Hmm.
And so getting out of college was important. So what we realized is that that is just one progressional support, but there are different such progressional support that a family is providing at different stages of their life, and so how to build those different progressional support systems, right from ensuring that they have strong foundations in literacy and numeracy, to becoming good in education to the point that they can get the stream that they want, to doing career counseling to understand which college to get into, to getting them through college, which is actually quite tough because they're all first generation learners, and then uh, getting into the job and climbing the job ladder. That was a very crucial component in all of this, because because they're first generation workers also, and they need a lot of mentoring and how to like not drop out of the job, because there's a very high dropout rate also if you don't work on it. How to kind of get them through that. And then another big realization was that the relationship, who they get married to, has a fundamental impact on their relationship, because all the gains you've made, you can like completely lose it. And they also have a tendency to kind of get into relationships which are not that are sometimes toxic, just because of the past experiences that they have had. So kind of how do you ensure that they get into the right relationships? And finally, the real breaking of the the cycle was not monetary. That was easy. What was more important was the cycle of violence, from the parent to the child. So we realized that it is important to also work with the children when they are, when they have their children and when they become parents. How do they parent, and providing the right kind of support during the parenting phase, so that the intergenerational trauma is broken in a lot of ways. So that's really been the core learning, I would say, in that whole period.
Oh my God. So you map mentors at every level for them.
Exactly.
Okay, okay. That's a lot of work, for each child that you're going to try to, I don't know if I can use this word, but rehabilitate into society, and make sure that the child, in a way, has disconnected from the trauma they come from, which is like a huge task. Oh my God, you have to be mad to do this. That's so much of energy, Jithin. That's so much of energy. How do you make sure your volunteers are through and through committed in this when you
Eh,
recruit them in the first place?
it's That's what I'm saying, which is that like the only way they can do this is if they are able to form that connection with the child. If they form that connection, and like not it's not one volunteer who's doing this, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it is like an average child, by the they have an average volunteer stays with us anything between 2 to 5 years. That's the average time period. The first year is really an opportunity for us to work with the volunteer to build that connection. And we do a lot of activities around it to make that happen. We have something called a dream camp, where the volunteer and the children and the volunteers all go to like a resort where they spend 3 days together, where they really actually deeply bond, where they share each other, what are their strengths, what do they find beautiful in each other, and they kind of share their life journey so far and help them process it. They share what their future, dreams are and aspirations are, and kind of commit to each other, saying, I'll be there to make that happen. Which means that after those 2 to 3 years, they will hand over the children to another volunteer, right? And but even when wherever they go, the child is in the back of their mind, and this child needs their support, they will turn up. So a lot of support, comes. So for example, one of our kids, Surya, he got into an AR Rahman school for music.
Oh,
And it was the fees was very expensive, some 2 lakhs or more, like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And but he was able to just create one of those Kickstarter kind of pages, and raise the funds from all the volunteers who supported him so far.
Oh,
So, and he was able to, and now he's in that college. So it's really beautiful to see that. So it's when you say that it takes a family, it takes a village to raise a child.
child, yeah.
It really takes a whole community to raise a child, and that community building is what is kind of happening, where we are building a community for the child at the volunteer level, at the child level also. And so through that, what we are noticing is that like the resources that is required to do all this, like all this energy, all of that exists in the community, but today that's not flowing because there are barriers. Like there are no connections between, like, I'm living next to a childcare institution, but I don't know about the childcare institution. I don't know the children in there. So obviously my care and my resources are not flowing. But a volunteer comes into the childcare institution, and then the volunteer then connects to their own relation networks, for funding support and all that stuff. What's happening is that these connections are getting formed, and through these connections, resources flow, and we are realizing there's an abundance of resources.
Yeah.
Like last year was the pandemic, and 40 children passed out of the college, and all of them ended up going, getting placed. 100% placement, and we were so surprised. Simply because people in the community were all able to kind of talk to their friends, family, and make it happen. So that's really been the experience, I would say.
Okay. And in these years, looking back, the moment which brought tears to your eyes, I'm sure there are many, but that moment which is unforgettable for you, which brought tears into your eyes, where your gratitude was overflowing, that you even had this epiphany of starting Make a Difference.
Oh yeah, it's quite a lot. It is quite a lot, but um, it's definitely been the work that I do with the boys that I work with. Like, I should call them men now because they're kind of much more older. But there have been these, we have had some really tough, like my children have gone through some really tough life experiences, and that has really held them back in a lot of ways, and which is kind of, they've visited jails multiple times, and and there are people who have been completely written off by everybody in their life, and and the fact that today, like I remember this time when I realized that, like especially one of my youth who's kind of kept in and out of jail so many times, that finally, like the judge herself was like, I will not give him bail anymore, because like, he has no intention to change. And I had to personally go and stand guarantee and like make a case saying that we will, like we'll get a house, he'll stay with us, but let it, like please let, because jail is not helping him in any way. And he had kind of given up hope that anybody will come and pull him out, because he realized, he was probably ashamed of the fact and was not reaching out to us. And I remember turning up and picking him up, getting him out of the jail. And like, I was like, I remember how committed I was. There was this commitment that, no matter what happens, I won't give up on this. And I could feel him feeling it and reciprocating it. And since then, like, he has not done that ever again. And he's almost like a model. He's a role model for many of the younger boys who are coming out of the home now, and a lot of them look up to him and respect him. And to just see that, like, it means so much to me, because it, like, at the end of the day, Matt, a lot of the stuff is idealistic, like, it just, we don't know whether, and yeah, like, there are times when I have been completely, like, I believe that, young people will care for each other and will have each other's back, and sometimes it's not the case, and start doubting humanity in some ways. But I have till, never had to doubt that if you are able to provide unconditional care and love for a child, that things will not turn around. Things will work out, and it'll all be beautiful.
I know. And, in the last 20 months, when the pandemic struck, it was a moment for a lot of us to get back into reflection. You have been through a lot of such moments through your life, ever since Make a Difference was born. And like you said, it's a movement. But what was the pandemic for you, Jithin? When you look back at the 20 months and how things shifted world over, how do you look at the pandemic?
Um, it's like, I was hoping that it would bring about a paradigm shift in how we will live, but obviously that's not happening now. But the big realization was that the people who suffer the most are the poorest of the poor, right? Like, yeah, we all experienced it. I got COVID, like everybody got, like, everybody, a lot of my friends got COVID, and it was traumatic. It was difficult for them and everything. But like, the pain is nothing that I experienced, at least I can speak for myself, compared to what the children and their parents are experiencing because of it. Like, they had no buffers, and without that buffer, that, like, like, their pain is not because of COVID. Their pain is from all directions, like, and things are crumbling. And what I genuinely realize is that, like, till then, I was still in the space of, I still want to design Mad more. I want to tweak it. I want to make it better. I want to perfect it before I ensure it reaches out to everybody and things like that. But I realized that that's just like me being indulgent and me, trying to play safe in a lot of ways. If I ask the children, is Mad ready to scale? If more children, if whatever we are giving right now, if more people could get it, is it worth it? And the answer would be a resounding yes. And they really get to choose whether I scale or not whether I feel ready or not. Because in some way that, I am afraid of scaling, because it comes with so much work. I have scaled once before, and I knew how my life changed because of it, right? How I got consumed by it, because scale does bring that with you. And there's so much more funds to raise and everything like that. And I realized that uh, I have to just do the right thing. And I don't feel prepared 100%, right? I would have liked to be a lot more stable from a financial point of view, a lot more stable from a personal point of view, like, all that stuff. But I'm not. But we don't have so much more time.
Yeah.
And I did see that there was not a single child or a family in Mad who asked for support during the pandemic that did not get supported.
Mm.
That's when I understood the real power of the community, which is much beyond us, much beyond me, which is that Mad did not have a program to support somebody when they had any kind of, crisis.
Mm.
But the communities came together. We had, like, we had so many stories that where people just came together, and within days or hours, whatever challenges was happening was getting resolved. And we were just sitting, we did not know what to do. And it was happening at a very decentralized underground level. So in some way I'm scared of it, but in some way I'm like, I have to open the box and, like, let the communities be formed. And yes, some of them won't get formed the right way. And I'm committed to kind of going in and fixing it and making it happen. So in some way you're kind of building it as you're building it, but it's okay, because like, in some way I do genuinely believe that the next 30 years are probably the most crucial for the poorest of the poor. Others will survive. Something will happen. They'll build their own bunkers and, migrate to the global north and everything. But, like, there are still millions, a few billion ultra poor in the world right now, and nobody is looking out for them. There is no infrastructure to really support them. And where I am, like, I think the final statement that I will make is that, like, the World Economic Forum came out with this research, which basically a report which is the Global Social Mobility Index, which spoke about how many generations does it take for a child born in the bottom 10% to hit, mean income, which is, no longer poor. And in, Sweden it's 2 generations, America it's 4 generations, India it's 7 generations, right? Like, think about it. Like, imagine growing up where you're realizing that you are going to be living in abject poverty, your child will be living in abject poverty, your grandchild will be living in abject poverty, right? Like, and that's not fair. And Make a Difference today is able to ensure that all our children are able to reach mean income in 18 years. That's less than 1 generation. And I'm like, that's probably good enough. And if we know how to take the poorest of the poor and get them to a space where they can take care of themselves and they can build their life, because once you get to middle class, you can build your own life, right? Like, that's probably the most important thing to be done in the next 30 years. And gearing up to do that.
Beautiful. And I don't feel like letting you go, but it's time to go. And 3 life lessons, Jithin, that you have taken from this amazing life that you've led so far.
Oh, okay. I've not thought about it, but the first thing that came to me is that um, I, my first one would be that trauma is real. And like, there was a time when I genuinely thought that, okay, fine, some people are, like, overly cautious about something, and, like, I can, like, create a safe space for them and just talk to them about it, and they will feel better. like, and you can basically you can change people overnight. That is really something I believed in. But what I realized is that, once you've been really hurt in difficult ways, like, it is actually very hard, and not everybody ever grows out of it.
Yeah.
And it really helped me be a lot more understanding of people, a lot less judgmental of people, because I think at some level I did judge people who got angry, got frustrated, all of those kind of stuff. And like, I have experienced now trauma to the point where I'm like, oh, I can also be all of those things which I really judged in others, and so that's definitely one life lesson that I'm kind of taking away at this point of time. Another big life lesson has really been that, uh, like death is an important part of life. Where I think when math started, I wanted, everybody to be with me for the rest of the journey forever. Like, that is the dream. And we'll all grow old together. We'll all have like a community and all those kind of stuff. And and but the truth is that life happens, and there are times for relationships to end and new relationships to start. And if you resist it too much, because you have this idea of what things needs to be, you're kind of swimming against the current of time, and you will eventually lose. So that, I'm kind of like, I'm able to see death with, I did see end as like a failure for a good part of my life. But like, I'm now genuinely seeing it as like, like you're going to die multiple times in this one life that you're going to have. And like, it's about how you kind of rebuild your life again. And that is kind of important, how you do it. So that's been another thought that's been kind of alive for me these days. And I think the last one is that uh, there is just like an external journey that we have to make. Like, there is like a very strong internal journey that we have to go in. And if you don't do that, you'll only, it's like the whole, what gets you here won't get you there. Like, I'm and it's not like these are development stages. Not like you can just get to the final stage. Like, I remember reading Gandhi, and I was like, tomorrow onwards I will be like Gandhi. I'll be like him. I'll practice servant leadership. I'll practice non-violence by learning non-violent communication and stuff like that. But then, some difficult situations, like some stress really happened in my life, and like, I crumbled. I was not able to be non-violent. I was not able to be, kind. And I realized that, there are these developmental stages, and you have to climb all of them. You have to, and if you don't, when a stress happens, you will crumble. So right now where I am is that, now I'm kind of building back from, and you'll crumble back to wherever your foundations are the strongest. So there's a lot of humility at this point of time, where I've kind of crumbled couple of levels for sure, if not couple, quite a lot of layers. And now, but now instead of like kind of trying to jump back to the topmost level, I'm kind of like, okay, fine. What is the next level? Can I build that strongly and take it as a next 30-year journey to kind of get to a point where I can truly be who I can be. So yeah, that's it.
Oh, wow. Jithin, every time I talk to you, and every time we come to this point when it's time to end the conversation, you leave me completely shocked, dumbfounded, because each time when you open one more layer of who you are, it's a very different Jithin that I see. But one thread that I commonly see in you is mad is always something which is make a difference, which is equal to hope. And I think the world needs hope big time now. And it is more such people who can spring that hope back in, drive the hope back in, and make sure that for the generation that we have actually borrowed the world from, we are instilling that hope in the generation that's going to lead. So God bless you, Jithin. May all your dreams come true and may you continue to be that star. I don't know how much to thank you. Honored to have you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty. And thanks for this conversation again. I'll drop your website ID. If there's some other contact details, do share it with me. I'll put it out. And there's any way people can step in, I'm sure people will be more than happy to do it. So thanks a lot, Jithin.
Thank you so much for the beautiful conversation. Really enjoyed talking to you, Rashmi.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
With that, we come to the end of this weekly quest of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know people who make the world beautiful. Write in to rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thhirdeye@gmail.com. Come, let's explore this amazing world together, both you and I.